Hello, everyone. This is Rick, and welcome to Astral Club. This is the Gray Alien Council answers my questions. Before I get into it, just want to mention real quickly Patreon. If you'd like to support Astral Club, you can do so. When you join Patreon, you get advanced episodes every Sunday. You get a library of downloaded episodes that you can put on your podcast app and listen to anywhere. And of course, you get a Patreon email where you can ask questions and we can talk back and forth. And there's a link in the description. Next up, private lessons. If you'd like a private lesson to learn how to astral project, be more than glad to send you the information. And the email is in the description. Since the Grush releases about the 12, I believe, is the number of non-Earth craft. We have to be careful based on what the disclosures have said. I want to talk about that. And naturally, I wanted to see what the Greys had to say about it. I've been trying to get in contact with the council and have been unable to establish contact. And I've also had some problems really recently projecting until last night. So I really didn't get an opportunity. But when I did, I left my body and I sent out a signal and I could tell it was accepted. So I focused on the ident of the council chambers on the Greys' home planet. Once I appeared there, the council was seated and expecting my arrival based on the fact that I had communicated it with Ken, who is now the head of that council. So it's nice to have a friend in high places. Anyway, when I arrived, they were very gracious and thanked me for my assistance when the old council had gotten out of line and needed to be removed. Of course, I said they were welcome, although, my representation was symbolic more than anything else, as, I considered myself a friend. And as such, I wanted to support my friend in reestablishing order on his planet. And most especially since he has been well disposed towards Earth and humans, much more so than that old council, which had very hostile plans. So I was quite happy to assist in any way that I could. I asked them, first of all, I told them about these disclosures that were being released by someone who used to work for the Defense Department named Grush. This wasn't news to them in that they were aware of many of the details, although, they're not exactly reading our articles, so they weren't aware of the recent disclosures, but of course they're aware of the information. And I was wondering if they could answer a few questions. I asked Ken, although I refer to him as, in a very respectable way. There's a way to address officials of the Greys, and it's done telepathically. The way you phrase your words, the way shows deference. It's very hard to explain and to put it into English. And so when I go through these questions, I'm going to give you my best translation in English. I've seen other books, like some of Monroe's books, the later ones, try to express telepathy in the most accurate way he thought possible using English, and instead it becomes very hard to read and disjointed. So understand that what you're getting here is a translation, probably of a translation, but I tried to preserve the nexus, the core truths of the answers, but also so that it's understandable to someone who can speak modern day English. So understand that's what's going on here. And as I always say, I'm sure I'm misstating some things, and I'm sure I may have missed some parts of the questions, just because it was too hard for me to translate and to understand in English. So I'm going to do my best here. And of course, my notes, as usual, are scribbled, because as soon as I woke up in the middle of the night, I scribbled 5 or 6 pages. And so I'm going to try my best to read this this hieroglyphic these hieroglyphic words to the best of my ability. I asked him if the council had made any major changes towards Earth. And Ken, on behalf of the council, because they were all communicating through him, he said that he'd ordered a stop to the collection of any new human biological material for their genetic studies. However, he did say that there was one group which has so far rejected their authority and has refused to cease operations. He said that we are attempting to gain their compliance. I asked him why they wouldn't comply, and he kind of, almost in an embarrassed way, as I would interpret it as a human, he said that they were loyal, well, the command staff, you might say, although it's more complex than that, but I'm going to have to use English military terms. He said that their command staff was loyal to the old council. And there was more subtext to it too. I think there was some sort of family relationship or deep friendship from past lives. Remember, they're continually cloning. It's a little complex, but that was the best way I could translate it based on what, the words that I had to work with and what he was feeding me telepathically. So I think that was close to what he was saying. Then it got me thinking about the whole Roswell crash. I mean, that's probably, to this day, the most famous UAP recovery that I think I'm aware of, and I think that most people, or that's probably the first thing you ever heard, was that crash of a flying saucer in 1947 in Roswell. And of course, it was the first reported in the paper as being the remains of an alien craft. Then, of course, quickly the military came, took over, and disinformation was spread. And, oh, no, it wasn't. It was some sort of weather balloon. And then over the years, they changed the story a couple different times. At any rate, I asked him about that crash, if he could tell me anything about how it happened or what happened. And he said that apparently there was a survivor from one of the crashes, because he told me that 2 craft crashed as a result of that accident near Roswell. Apparently, they have strong EM fields around their scout craft. And he said that an atmospheric electrical discharge, lightning, temporarily disrupted their guidance system of one of the scout craft. And it then collided with another scout craft that was flying in formation with it. And it caused both craft to crash and be lost. The one we talk about near Roswell was found very quickly. But he said the other one wasn't found until sometime later, he said. He has difficulty, and all the Greys have difficulty using our time measurements. It's very difficult for them to understand how we tell time. but that was the closest I could get to it. So apparently that was the story as to why the crash happened in the first place, and the fact that there was two craft, not one. I then asked, just out of curiosity, I said, why didn't you try to mount some sort of a rescue operation? Well, he said, we didn't learn about what had happened right away. The craft were missing and they weren't communicating, but it was unknown at the time what had happened. By the time they were able to track down the craft, the human military was already all over the one craft. And the other one was even in worse shape than the one that the humans found right away in near Roswell. He said that both craft, there was no energy fields around them, and that they were, in essence, now useless. They would have had to use a much larger craft to try a retrieval, and they were afraid that would attract attention that they did not want. And since they had received no communications, it was assumed that the inhabitants, the crew, had also perished in the collisions. So with all that in mind, and especially the security concerns and the American military crawling all over the place, they couldn't afford taking a risk trying to retrieve these non-functional craft. Anyway, as I said, they had received a message from one of the survivors, and that's where they learned the whole story as to what had happened. See, the storm itself was unexpected. They hadn't predicted it. It was just one of those weird things that just sometimes happens on Earth out of nowhere. They generally try to stay away from, like most aircraft do, any type of disturbances, high winds, but especially lightning, because of the way their craft is controlled with these strong electromagnetic fields. Getting hit by a lightning bolt causes a temporary disruption in guidance and control. Now, normally they would be able to recover, but when it collided with the other craft in formation, they were both damaged and they both ended up crashing. So that's what happened. I then asked, was there any communication or further communication from the U.S. military based on the fact that I guess one survivor existed, which they did mention that they had been taken by the American military and kept in a secure facility. And it was the surviving alien, which didn't survive for too long. I know they did their best, I'm sure, to keep him alive, but there's something about our atmosphere that is just not conducive to long-term health in grays. And perhaps that one was injured anyway, and maybe we weren't sure how to properly patch it up. I don't know. But I asked, did they have any other communication? And they said, yes, the surviving alien did extend an offer that I guess was prompted by your military, saying that we offered to return the non-functional bodies of the crews, but the Greys turned it down because they had no use for decomposing bodies. And then he went on to explain that, frankly, the offer confused us. See, they don't understand our reverence for the treatment of dead physical bodies. For them, it's really just an obsolete, degenerated, useless physical shell. It's of no use to them, so there's no reverence for it. Remember, typically, from what I've seen, they use a cloning process, and before the body of the gray ceases to function, they transfer the psyche, the intelligence, the personality, I don't know, call it whatever you like, into an identical cloned body. And then they just discard the old body, and I think I saw one time they just threw it into this like vat of chemicals. So they don't have any particular reverence for these they're deceased. So it's just another example of misunderstanding of cultures. You know, we have cultures here on Earth that have misunderstandings. Now imagine an alien culture. It's amazing that I can even converse with them and give you somewhat of a decent idea as to what was being said and what they were projecting to me. When you're dealing with minds and cultures that are alien to one another, and you know you're trying to truly communicate using ideas and words that hopefully you have in common. But when you don't have those things in common, you've got to try to figure out what it is they're talking about and try to transcribe it the best way you can. He went on to say, Ken, that, or the head of the council, I don't call him Ken anymore. I mean, I use the respectful terms. But anyway, he said, we ignored their inexplicable offer because they didn't understand it. But they did ask for a meeting in person with our leadership. He said, there was some confusion, though, as to the timing, as your species, he said, uses odd methods to track time-space. So time-space coordinates, he said. However, eventually they cracked our code, and a successful rendezvous occurred in a secret military-controlled space. The picture I got was a very deserted, very warm desert area somewhere, and that's the most comfortable for the Greys when they're coming to Earth. And he said that in communication with us, he said that your people wanted our help in discovering how the scout craft functioned. He said they admitted that their technology was far beyond human science and that they couldn't understand how our craft flew, what fuel it used, and how it was maneuvered and how navigation was completed. I mean, I've seen some of these craft myself in the past, and there's no buttons and knobs and dials and stick shifts and whatever else, because it's controlled telepathically. The Greys they actually have an implant that allows them to transmit their brain waves and instructions to the craft, causing quick course corrections and making very, very rapid maneuvers, which the construction of the craft and their EM fields allow them to do. But, you know, without that implant, it would be almost impossible, I would imagine, to actually figure out how the craft would be maneuvered and navigated, because the implant was keyed to their brain waves. Now, I'm assuming that humans probably dug out those chips, because I'm sure they did thorough autopsies and probably found something that looked a little weird. But trying to use that highly advanced technology and then translate it into a human brain would be much more difficult. But it is interesting, though, that we've seen advances in that very area. I've read about in some articles recently where Elon Musk and some other people are working on brain implants that would allow people to communicate with each other and to communicate with machinery. So is that something we just dreamed up, or did we get the idea from what we found in the Greys' bodies? Who knows? My guess is that's an ultra top secret, and you'll probably never find out. And probably the people who think they're inventing this don't even know exactly where they got some of the tech that they used to start the process. It just gets released, and if you don't have a need to know, you don't have a need to know. The Greys considered our request and offered to assist the humans in decoding their technology, at least certain parts of it. However, in return, they insisted that we destroy all nuclear weapons on our planet, because they're not only a threat to destroying life on Earth, but they're even possibly a threat to time-space itself, which has an effect beyond the Earth. And perhaps that's why, starting with the explosions in Japan, in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, of nuclear weapons, that it just seems like there was an uptick in interest in our planet from UAPs after that event. It got their attention. And I think what it did, based on the communication I was getting, was that it sent out ripples in time space that caused consternation. So they figured that would be a good bargaining chip and then they figured we would take them up on it, because at the end of the day, they understand, as we should, that nuclear weapons are bad weapons. I mean, you spend huge amounts of money creating these things, and they were only ever used once and never again, because people understand, even at the simplest level, that using those weapons, you're not going to have a win-win situation. You unleash some of those weapons, and then others are released, and before you know it, nobody wins the war, everybody loses. And that's even without us knowing about whatever time-space disruption these things can cause as well to areas outside of the Earth. So the Greys, with their thought process, figured that we would take them up on that offer. And they still, as he was explaining this to me, he didn't understand why our people turned down the offer. I told him that based on my knowledge of the military, that as soon as they mentioned us giving up nuclear weapons, the military probably thought, well, they're afraid because they want to launch an invasion or attack Earth or take over the Earth. And so nuclear weapons must be the one thing they fear, so we better keep those. And when I explained that, what I got was basically a blank look, the Grey equivalent of a blank look. Like they didn't quite understand the level of paranoia that I was trying to share with them. But they accepted it because, as a human, they accept my thought processes as more accurate. And certainly my understanding of the military is more accurate than because for them it was inexplicable. They did not expect us to turn them down. So I said, well, okay, when they turned down your offer to assist if we got rid of the nuclear weapons, what did you do? They said, well, we just separated ourselves and left the humans to their own devices. Good luck, trying to to figure out how that craft works because of the complexity. Although I suspect there are certain surface level things that we have been able to gain, and probably we fed it through the military industrial complex, so that some of that information has been able to be taken advantage of. But I doubt we've been able to truly master exactly how their craft works and why, because it's so extremely advanced. He then asked me once again about why were humans afraid that the Greys would invade our planet. He said nuclear weapons are a threat to everyone on your planet, and indeed our galaxy. It would be the best for everyone if they were eliminated. Besides, he didn't understand. He said that his people have been visiting Earth for thousands of years. They have some science bases here, but he said the Earth's biosphere is not conducive to their proper functioning of their biological processes. That's as close as I can get to what he was trying to communicate. He said, first of all, your humidity, and when he used the word humidity, he used it like we would talk about something that was loathsome, disgusting, like muck in a septic tank kind of thing. He said, your humidity is unbearable, as is your low planetary temperatures, except for a few barren, unoccupied places. By that he meant deserts. He said, which are slightly more suitable. He says there are many other problems with Earth as well. He said the reason they've been doing their genetic studies is they wanted to create a hybrid not only to strengthen their own people, because they're starting to have problems with the cloning process. It's becoming less reliable. More errors are creeping in, which to me kind of is like you make a copy on a machine and then you make another copy of the copy and a copy of a copy, and eventually little things start cropping up. You're missing things. Things are failing, and I think that's what might be happening with their cloning program. I don't know. At any rate, they were trying to bolster their own strength through a hybrid program with humans. But he also told me that, to be honest, they wanted to have small scientific colonies on the Earth with permission of the various Earth governments to continue their studies of Earth. But the Grey race as a whole, they're interested in the Earth and studying it, but it's not a home for them because it's not suitable for their race. I said, listen, I understand your motives, but our militaries are trained to look for threats everywhere. And to be honest with you, there was no chance that global disarmament was going to occur in response to your offer. And so I need you to understand that so that you don't try to make that mistake again. I said, you might want to try to get me involved in some negotiation planning. If you want to kind of bounce off of me what you want to say to them, just leave my name out of it. I said I might be able to help you to understand the mindset, because I know it might be inexplicable to you, but it's all too explicable to me. And he said, okay, I understand your thoughts on the matter now, and we will consult you in the future should we decide to, reopen communications with your planet. I knew I was getting signals to start returning to my body, so I quickly thanked him, but I asked him one last question. I said, hey, there's been claims that the Earth has 12 of these UAPs. I said, are they all yours? And he said, no. They knew that Earth has collected craft from several other visiting species, although he didn't know all the details or what craft or what races. But they were not missing 12 craft. So they obviously had to come from some other sources. At that point, I thanked them because I could feel being called back, and I was pulled back to my body. So hopefully you liked that and benefited and learned something. I know I learned something from going there and asking some of those questions, which I've kind of been wanting to do for a while, but everything that's going on right now just got me thinking about it. So I figured now was a good time to, get back in touch with good old Ken, head of the council, and try to find out, what was going on in the past and in the present, at least to some degree. If you like that, please hit the like button, share it with those of like mind. Subscribe if you haven't already. If you have, make sure that bell is solid so that you're getting all of the notifications on Wednesday afternoon and Saturday morning when the new uploads are available. And please leave your questions and comments. I'm very much interested in what you think about what the Greys had to say and what you think about what's been going on with all of these UAP disclosures and what your take is on it. I'm very interested, and I'm sure everybody else is too. This is Rick, and as always, I will see you on the astral plane.